I wonder if we really think that this new report tells us anything we didn't know already in terms of how so many young people, particularly young girls, were let down again and again, year after year, by police officers, social workers, council officials, elected officials. I mean, everybody from start to finish, these children were let down when everybody knew that they were being sexually abused, gang raped on regular occasions by groomers, and no one did anything. Tell us about what this review has told us.
Well, I mean, what it's told us is, of course, a lot more detail about what happened in Oldham. But you're absolutely right that what we see from this report is what we've seen in other reports, particularly recently and in the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, that we get police and local authorities putting out these kind of grandiose plans, strategic plans, business plans for dealing with child sexual exploitation, but the delivery on the ground is not there, or it's totally inadequate. So what we've seen from this report is you're right, in outline is what we already know, that the plans are there, but they are not delivered on the ground. That is the fundamental problem.
Yeah, I mean, it is. The one particular case was cited. It's not her real name, but identified only as Sophie. There was a case of one girl. She was abused, aged just 12 years old, a child. After significant opportunities were missed to protect her, she actually went to Oldham Police Station. We're often told no one told the police they didn't know. No, she went to Oldham Police Station to report that she had been sexually assaulted back in October 2006. She was told to come back when she was not drunk. The girl was then taken from the police station, picked up in a car by one of her abusers, raped in the car, and then taken to a house and raped multiple times by 5 different men. The report also details how the ringleader of a notorious grooming gang in Rochdale, Shabir Ahmed, was employed by Oldham Council as a welfare rights officer. And despite multiple concerns being raised about him, despite him even being arrested by the police for sexual assault of children, no one told his employers, and he carried on as a welfare rights officer at the council. I mean, defies belief.
It defies belief, but I think if we did similar reports in other areas of the country, we would actually find similar sorts of things going on. There are a number of factors in this. There's issues of police and social services culture. There's probably issues of training. There's obviously issues of political sensitivity around some of these cases, as we all know, where people pull their punches for that reason. So all these factors are in the mix. I think if we're going to deal with this, we need a complete kind of reset on how we deal with child sexual exploitation, and we're probably going to have to bring in some mandatory rules about how people respond to this, mandatory reporting and mandatory responses, because without that, how do we move forward?
Absolutely. And you mentioned again, these stories all emerged. I've said the Times newspaper did a brilliant job actually exposing a lot of this. All credit to my colleagues there who did that. But basically, it was known for years that there were a bunch of girls, and we discovered later on this was happening in pretty much every town and city across the country, where they were girls, young white girls were being groomed, were being systematically made drunk and gang raped on a regular basis by gangs of men who were largely from Pakistani background and heritage. And there was a whole thing that no one wanted to say anything or do anything because they didn't want to be accused of Islamophobia or racism, and everyone kept quiet about it. And in a lot of these areas, there were local, largely Labour councils with also a lot of ethnic minority representation, and there was just a general view that just don't go near it. And an awful lot of people in this country feel that basically we sacrificed a whole bunch of 12, 13 and 14-year-old girls on the altar of political correctness because they didn't want to offend anybody.
I think that issue is there in the mix. It's difficult, of course, to prove that in an individual case because nobody's ever going to say, well, I didn't deal with that case for that reason. But, you're right. The track record of many local authorities, particularly Labour local authorities on this, has been very, very poor. And I say that as somebody actually who is personally in the main a supporter of the Labour Party. But,
it's not a party political point. This largely happened in urban areas. They tend to be Labour councils, and they failed to deal with this.
And the point has been made that if you have one party control of any area, that is not a recipe for accountability and transparency. So I think that's a problem as well. Yeah. But, we do need a complete reset on this. We could go through the next few years having more of these inquiry reports, and inquiries are great for, lawyers like me. But ultimately, we know what the problems are. We've got to find solutions for them. And as I say, that is going to involve some sort of mandatory approach to how these cases are dealt with. But the evidence is already there. and we need to move on to
we know what happened, we know why it happened, and it's still happening right now. That's the reality, isn't it? And I'm speaking to many people who've been involved with this over the years. This view that when these girls, often working class girls, and they were often on drugs and drink. Well, you know what? They were fed those by their abusers, and actually to cope with that life, you'd have to be, as we know, lots of women working in prostitution and the sex industry do actually also abuse drugs and drink for the very same reasons. But this idea that 12, 13, 14-year-old girls turning up with men who are 30 years their senior to get abortions, and no one went, clearly this is sexual abuse. You can't be pregnant at 12, 13, 14 without having been sexually abused, because it's a criminal offence to have sex with a child. And yet they were treating these girls as if they were prostitutes, as if they were just sort of as if they were just sluts off the street. It didn't really matter. That attitude has got to change.
It's got to change. And actually, a few years ago, with all the publicity over Savile and the public debate around that, we thought that sort of victim-blaming attitude had started to go. But then we discovered only a few years later in Greater Manchester that those sorts of attitudes were still appearing in social work files, and those attitudes are still there and seem to be very hard to dislodge. So there's issues of culture in police and social services around that, which still have to be addressed. It's a major issue.
Absolutely. Really good to talk to you, Richard. Richard Score is Head of Abuse at Slater and Gordon Solicitors. Thank you very much indeed. I just wonder how many more of these reports are going to have. And as you say, look, we know what happened. We know the reasons why. What we need to do is stop it from continuing to happen.